Hello.
Hiya.
Hi, Jane. How are you? How are things?
Fine. I've just had to kick my daughter out of her bedroom, so she's not very happy.
Oh no. Oh no. Not very good.
Well, just because
it's
this
not.
this is the only room that has like sort of good,
Yeah.
reliable connectivity.
Yeah. You
So,
kind of.
like it's okay. Like say I'm on a call with my team,
Yeah.
I'm right to work in the room that I work in, but
Yeah.
for this I was like, I can't really have it dropping out.
Well, thanks for that, and I apologise.
That'd be
to
like
your
poor
daughter.
form, right?
Like, yeah.
I'm just gonna raise it
Yeah,
up a bit.
get yourself.
I'm sitting at her very small desk.
No worries at all. Oh, how old is she? We have a kicked out
She's just turned 10, so she's not that
said
small.
to right. Okay, yeah. So it's
But yeah,
that makes sense then.
I can't rule out a tantrum and slamming doors.
Well, I had the cabinet secretary for communities on the call, the webinar yesterday, and her son ran into the room, and so that was all fine. That's a new normal. That's what it. So if it happens,
That's nice.
Absolutely.
I'm just
Cool.
going to go and get my water because I put it down somewhere and I can't quite see it.
No worries, no worries. All good.
Do you know what kind of people you've got coming for this? Or I imagine everyone will probably want to be in their gardens.
I think yeah. Well, I've seen who signed up to it, and there's about 58 that signed up, but I think there are sometimes people obviously just sign up at the moment.
It's a bit hit or miss,
so,
yeah.
Totally. So who's signed up to it? I've seen a lot of I think someone from Firstport. There's lots of people just generally interested in the charity, social enterprise type of sector.
That's cool.
That's all good. What I thought was, so I've got questions and whatever else. There's obviously the chat function. I'll do the housekeeping stuff. I'll kind of say to them if they want to ask some questions, we might have some room at the end, and I'll filter them and sense check them so there's no.
Of course, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's fine.
That go, but just in terms of kind of format, I thought just kind of as we discussed, basically looking at food. And what's going to be interesting, like, is kind of social enterprise and retail and how that's going to change, or just retail basically. You don't have a crystal ball, I know that, but innovations of that, and then also they've worked around about Housing First Pathfinders project.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
If that's all right, and House First, and I've seen mention of the Everybody Home Collective, and obviously you're kind of featuring in there, and there's the kind of strategy to keep people that were sleeping rough and are accommodated, basically just make sure there's some changes. So that's a kind of basic thread.
That's cool, yeah.
Is that cool? Okay, cool. I'll just press go then just now. So we're not broadcasting, so I'll press the broadcast button,
no worries.
And then we'll start. Yesterday, actually, we were a little bit later because of some technical issues, so it's nice to actually start on time today. So we just nice to
saying like the social niceties have gone out the window. You know, when you normally have a meeting and you're like, do you want a biscuit and how about some water? And like, that's one of the weird things about like the current situation.
Yeah, you're just straight into it. There's not exactly. Well, actually, it's a weird thing, but I find in general, I'm kind of in some ways doing a lot more. You're missing out on the human interaction, so that's not a good thing. But I'm not traveling to work, and I'm not kind of in the Glasgow Edinburgh train, all of those sort of things. So so there are some positives. So we're
definitely, yeah. It's kind of more efficient and in some ways, right?
Absolutely. So we've got a few more people joining us just now, but I think we'll just crack in the spirit of just what we've said, kind of crack on.
Yeah, and people can just join, can't they? It doesn't really matter.
People can join, all good. So just in terms of the people that are attending, all the kind of usual housekeeping rules, there's a chat function or a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. If you want to ask some questions, we'll have some space at the end of the webinar. If you can try and keep the questions as short as possible, it makes it easier for me to read and filter, and we'll see how much time we have for them. But just to kick off, thank you very much, Jane, for coming on to the webinar today. It's again, it's a kind of follow-up webinar to a series that we had a few months ago when we were just, I guess, at the start of COVID-19, and the changes were kind of being implemented. And we had a session or a series of webinars with some leaders around about how they were coping with their own well-being and that sort of thing. I think now the sector we're all kind of looking at. I guess this is. I'm not going to use a cliche term, but it's the normal at the moment, and we're preparing to work through this time and as we're working just now for the time being. So thanks for joining the session. That's kind of like overview. And the things that I kind of want to touch on throughout this webinar are looking at kind of innovation within retail and the kind of retail space, homelessness, obviously, there's been some positives there, and then as I said, the leadership, but especially leadership thinking about basically rebuilding of this sector, and you're part of the sector, but then also the kind of the inner reserves or resilience that leaders might need to make some tough decisions. So that's the framework for it. But I thought you could, if you could just like start off by giving us a bit of an overview about Social Bite. We all kind of know of the model; it's a well-known brand. But also kind of how you got to where you are just now pre-COVID, and how you scaled as an organisation.
Yeah, so Social Bite is was founded as a social business. That was like the original concept. And the founders, Josh and Alice, had this quite simple vision initially of, well, we're going to set up a sandwich shop chain. We're going to take on Pret and Starbucks and the like, and we're going to just try and make some profit, and we're going to give it away. So it was quite a simple concept. And they originally did that, gave some funds to some charities, both in the UK and Scotland, as well as overseas. But the concept evolved quite rapidly when they got to know the homeless community in Edinburgh. So they opened their first shop in Rose Street, and they got to know some of the big issue sellers that are down that end of Rose Street. And one of the guys, a guy called Pete, was repeatedly asking for work, and they eventually offered him a job. And that led to them also employing Pete's brother. And then, 3 or 4 members of like the homeless community doing different bits of work for Social Bite. So, sometimes it was just like flyering, sometimes it was working in the kitchen. So that employment side was part of the early model, and then equally started to this notion of suspended food, or paying it forward. So customers buying a coffee and then buying a coffee for somebody who couldn't afford one. So that was like the very kind of early days of Social Bite. So there's now 7 Social Bite cafes. There's 4 public cafes, so 2 in Edinburgh, 1 in Glasgow, 1 in Aberdeen, and then there's 3 concessions that we run with partners, and then a corporate catering arm of Social Bite, which has really been fundamental, that infrastructure, to the work we've done around COVID-19. So that was the kind of social enterprise origins, if you like. But over the years, the model has grown and expanded. So really changed from thinking about, okay, well, let's have 100 shops across the UK and take on Pret and all the rest, to more thinking, well, we could make more of an impact here. And I think through Josh's strengths, so Josh Littlejohn is one of the co-founders, has real strengths around events, and tried to think about how we could put that best to use. And so ran this very successful, which was the Scottish Business Awards, for a few years. And then that turned into Social Bite running its own events in terms of a sleep out for CEOs and kind of more wealthy individuals, and then the mass sleep outs that we ran as well. And those funds were then more put towards, in the first instance, Social Bite Village, which is a community project in the north of Edinburgh, so where up to 20 people are housed, and then latterly to the really significant Housing First programme, which was funded out of the proceeds of the Sleep in the Park events. So it's kind of went wider than that original cafe concept.
And in terms of, so you've worked within the sector for a while, and you've obviously been with Social Bite for a while, and you've been with Venture Scotland. You were the director there before. You'll have seen some changes over the years. My observation, not yours, but Within the sector, sometimes we can have our view on scale. So if for people like me who works for a funder or a social investor, you can have a certain view on how big something should be and what scale and impact looks like. To some extent, maybe it's quite a Scottish thing, you can be successful, but maybe not too successful. There's kind of like there's views sometimes on, I guess, just basically what a social enterprise should look like, what impact should look like, what a business model should look like, and certainly what success should look like. What's your thoughts and experiences on that?
Yeah, so I think so personally, I became involved with Social Bite on a voluntary level, like about 5.5 years ago now. So I was I'd left Venture Scotland when I shortly after having my second child, and was doing a leadership development program called the Core Social Leadership program. So I was very fortunate to be paid a bursary during that time, and that freed me up to kind of do some learning. And one of the things I had to do was spend time with an organization, and I wanted to do something that was really like different. And quite a few people said, you should go and talk to Josh, you should go to Social Bite. And I did, and it's quite interesting because I approached quite a few different charities, quite a few didn't get back to me, but he did. So, never one to look like gift horse in the mouth. I think I kind of came at it from really quite a curious angle. And so in terms of Social Bite's approach and success and all the rest of it, I guess what appealed to me most was that, wow, here's an opportunity to make quite a sizable difference. That was always like the thing that drew me to the organization, and like just an insane amount of potential. So that appealed to me. And obviously the thing about social enterprise is that in a lot of senses it gives you a much more like liberated platform. So you're not so tied into this kind of jigsaw of grants that you could be with, or unreliable council contracts. You have a lot more freedom, and the Social Bite model is evolved whereby the primary sources of income are trading and then unrestricted income from individuals. And that's a really like free place to be. So for me, as somebody who is most motivated by making an impact, it's a brilliant place to operate because it means you can be very innovative, and it's not like you can rip up the rule book and just do whatever you like, because we still have we do a lot of evaluation, we do reporting of our own, all the rest of it, but we have great freedom to operate and change what we're doing. And I think that is always what I liked about working at Social Bite. So in terms of success, I think, I kind of think like the evolution of what's become quite a sizable charity, as well as having the social enterprise, is, you must do the right thing with the funds that you raised. So you must make the most possible difference. So you mustn't like just chuck that cash around or waste it. So we still have a very lean central team. It's minuscule compared with a lot of organizations. So we only employed our first proper fundraiser like about just over a year ago, for example.
Wow.
So I think, and so personally, I've written a lot of applications. I've done a lot of that work directly, and the same with like Josh is like, he will write fundraising letters and all of this stuff directly. So there's not a big sort of machine underneath this. It's a very lean operation.
So that lean growth model, I can imagine actually has been really pivotal in the growth and the success of the company. And certainly with views on growth and scale, we would always advise people to look at lean models. Growth in terms of increasing your turnover but then your expenses obviously doesn't make a sustainable business model. You talked about having a strong trading model, and obviously COVID-19 has hit a lot of organisations who have a strong trading model the most, conversely. So it's heavy. So we spent years saying to organisations, don't take grant funding, don't build a sustainable trading model. But actually, we've seen organisations at the moment who have really been kind of hit the hardest. Whatever the reflections I've had from someone in a similar position that I've spoken to, they've said that they worked through the banking crash before, and actually what they saw then was that a lot of the funding and grant funding, restricted funding, was geared towards kind of keeping the lights on, or basically emergency funding, as you would expect, because it's emergency. But actually, the space for innovation and the space to have somebody to try out some new thing, to innovate out of what was a particularly tough time, wasn't necessarily there. Now you've got experience of taking on investment as well as obviously trading, building a trading model. What would you say about how you've used investment, or how you might use, I guess, that unrestricted money to innovate and to trade at the moment through COVID-19? And what are some of the things that you might expect that might affect maybe the retail sector with technology, the way we buy things?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about trading is a bit of a double-edged sword, because I was thinking about like how we went about responding to the crisis. And one of the things I reflected on when I was just even like a week into it, because I was sort of thinking, so we probably started planning for the crisis, for like really thinking about it, probably 2 weeks before the lockdown, something in that region, and had the idea around delivering out food and doing this like emergency crisis work probably about a week before the lockdown. So that's roughly where it is in my mind.
Yeah.
So, and I was thinking about it. So it meant that we were, and I think we were partly the reason we were so mindful of it is because we could see, wow, we're going to have like zero trade. So if we don't respond really quickly, then we could be in deep trouble. So I think that drove our urgency, where sometimes I think maybe if you were grant funded, you're like, well, it's fine, because, we're going to still have this income that we would normally have, and that won't be disrupted. But of course now some of the organizations that almost weren't compelled to act, that now they're almost sort of having to play catch up. But I think because we were really compelled and we could see that was coming, it prompted like us to think creatively, like at quite an early stage. And I think that meant that when we approached Scottish Government with our idea around deliveries, we were very ahead of the curve in thinking about that stuff, because none of the grant streams or anything even existed at that point. And that put us at a massive advantage, because it meant that we could be, I guess, chosen by the government to almost set the example of what could be done. So I think the fact that we would normally be relying on commercial trading put us into quite a creative mode, if you like. And I suppose for me, the big drivers were around, we can't not do anything, so we're going to need to help people on the one hand, and then the second thing is there is no way that we want to lose employees when we've worked so hard to build our social enterprise. So like those two things are like just drive your agenda and action very strongly. So I think and so I felt personally that regardless of securing government support, that we should take action regardless, and that if we did that, we would be highly likely to gain public support. And in fact, we've had both, which is great in the short term. Yeah, and to your point about investment, I think investment's been really important to Social Bite in terms of having funds to fit out new cafe units, having funds to take the risk on events, major events that we've done. So it's given us the ability to take risks, and so I think it comes from the mindset, a much more commercial mindset. So our board is very, very commercial. So in terms of my own position, when I first encountered Social Bite as a volunteer that gave advice and then did quite a lot of work, I then became a trustee for about a year of Social Bite before I did any paid work for Social Bite. And I stopped being a trustee. But I was really the first person from a charitable background to have any significant influence on the organisation. So the boards, because there are still 3 different boards in Social Bite, the charity then and 2 enterprises, is very commercial in approach. So for those guys, it's like, yeah, why would you not take a loan? Like it's not the thing. So it just doesn't seem like a risky thing to do.
Sure. It's in fact probably the opposite. It facilitates growth. And
exactly. So there's a high level of comfort in trying to do that, and I think we've been pretty successful in using those funds, and the funds have been extremely helpful, I think.
And you mentioned before the CLOR fellowship and your own kind of reflection on being a leader, and I guess with those types of programs, you reflect on your leadership style. You kind of reflect on your own kind of like resilience and that sort of thing. So interesting. So it seems that that's put you in a good position for how you thought about actually where you need to take the business at the moment, the social business, and potentially think about where the social business will be in this kind of newer normal, to use a term, of trading for Social Bite. Now, there's others within the sector who maybe aren't as far ahead, and actually we are thinking as a sector, how do we support those organisations? There are some tough decisions potentially that people will need to. You mentioned you didn't want to lose staff. So there's some tough decisions around about potential redundancy, around about mergers potentially, around about potentially looking at restructures. What do you think from a leadership perspective, that's not you necessarily, but leaders in terms of that support, in terms of their own leadership, like the CLOR program is giving you, but then practical advice from lawyers, accountants, whatever else, in order to think about the business?
Yeah, I think so. I believe quite strongly that I've benefited from. So when I was director at Venture Scotland, I think we nearly went bust at least twice, like seriously. And certainly on one occasion that I remember very vividly.
I remember those, not in this job, but previous jobs, Yeah,
and I it was really tough. I think I was in my early 30s and running a charity, and it was absolutely brutal. It was like, wow, I think we could. We're really struggling here, and it was one of those "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger" things for me personally, where we were right up against the wall, and just youth sector is absolutely brutal for trying to get the cash. It's really hard work, and we were really struggling, and we lost one of our major funders just because it had closed as a fund, and we considered all sorts of tough options like reducing hours, losing staff, operating really differently, yada yada. It also led to this wave of energy to fundraise, and went on the absolute run of success of then raising for that charity really quite significant funds over a 2, 3, 4 year period, and including like getting support from much further afield from London and all sorts. So it was one of those where you just have to look it in the eye and be like, yep, we could fail here, but we were determined to not have that happen. And I remember vividly my partner in crime was not an accountant, but my finance manager that I had at the time, who was almost like the voice of doom. You know, she was like, look at the reality, right? Because I'm a massive optimist, but she was like, must look at this in the face. And she really helped me with that, because, you know, I was avoiding it in a way. I had to look it square in the face, and that was such a valuable lesson for me. So when I've been faced with that again, so this is another example where you're like, you must face the brutal reality. Right? The brutal reality facing our enterprise, if we look at the months ahead, is that there may be really limited footfall in city centres. Yes, we face that brutal reality. You must face the brutal reality that the issue that we're trying to help around homelessness and poverty is going to get worse. That's a brutal reality. You know, and so how are you going to react to that? So, and then I think it's realizing that even when faced with that brutal reality, you have tons of options, actually. Like, so if you get your heads together and you get a solid team around the table, you can probably think of 50 different scenarios. And yeah, so I think, what did I learn from that position? I suppose just that, you got to face the facts, and you've got to, you know, work hard, be creative, bring your team into it. So not hold it all yourself, but bring everyone in, and, you know, try to think through how you face that reality together. But yeah, I mean, in terms of resilience, again, you know, I did learn a huge amount through the CLAW leadership program, because, you know, I think when I went to do that, I'd been working really hard for like 9 years, leading a sort of small to medium-sized charity in Scotland. And in amongst it, I'd had 2 children, taken mat leave, reduced my hours. So I was trying to do like more with less time, trying to balance having, I mean, I think the hardest year I've ever faced was like running Venture Scotland whilst being pregnant and having a toddler. Like, what? And that was just after the financial crisis. So like, you
everything
know,
at once.
Everything at once is like absolutely mad. So I think I've, you know, I learned a huge amount from that process. But yeah, I think I've found through time that that if you're proactive around like how you balance stuff and your mental health, well, not if you are, that's actually, you know, 100% a requirement. Like, it's not a nice to have. It's like, you must be proactive about this, because otherwise you will crash and burn. So I guess I have like many layers of this. So I have counseling to try and I guess deal with the stress of my work, to deal with the sadness of my work, deal with how my work collides with my home life. So that's really important for me. So I do that on a regular basis. I have a coach, which was a great thing that I had through the CLAW program, and then I just continued on. So that's been a brilliant support. I also have this big peer network because of having done the program, and which is great. So I have, you know, a WhatsApp group of leaders that are based across the UK. And if I'm like, does anybody know how to do this? And they'll be, you get like 5 responses in about a second. So, you know, that's invaluable. But yeah, there's lots of different things. I mean,
Brilliant.
I think one of the main things I've found, I mean, I'm 42, so I'm by social bite standards, I'm absolutely ancient. But yeah, I think one of the things I learned through having children is that I'm more effective when I work less. So I've had that feedback from like loads of people. Like, maybe because I'm quite full on, so like it gives other people a bit of space, like when I'm not around. So I think partly because of that, I think working, so I work 4 days across 5. I've done that since I've had more responsibility at Social Bite. Where I led Venture Scotland on 3 days a week. I'd like to think it was less, but I feel like 80% of my brain space goes to that.
Sure.
In reality,
Yeah.
you have to think about a lot of stuff. But does that need to mean that I spend 80% of my time physically in an office? Like, I really don't think it does. And to be the person that I want to spend time with my kids. I want to pick them up from school. I want to work half a day on a Friday. So, you know, that's my choice, but I also think it makes me better at my job.
Do you see a good sense of self-awareness about yourself and your job, and being sorry to kind of interrupt there, and what strikes me is that you have an excellent way of coping with the stresses and strains in terms of that kind of layered approach. Was that quite a, you were saying counselling? I'm a big fan of counselling, and having that space that isn't your partner to speak to about work, because actually you can.
Yeah, it's really boring.
It's really boring. You're like, okay, we're speaking to about that one person again. So I think it's it can be a boring thing, but having that kind of space, do you think that's just something that, well, it's a leading question, that as a leader, you need that space, or just anyone in the workplace actually, to have that awareness, to know how you work the best, and then to try and shape your work life as much as possible round about that? Now, it's good if you've got an employer that's responsive to that, but how important do you think it is to be able to, within your organisation, how much can you kind of role model that to say within your staff team, right, we're in a really unbelievably strange place at the moment. As a staff team, I need you're going to work different hours. I need you to tell me how you're going to work the best and with the most effectively, but then also how do you within a staff team then cascade that down to say you need to think about your own support networks? I don't have the answers to that question. It's a big question, but
I totally agree. I mean, I think you do have to role model it. So, you know, I think, and it's obvious stuff to me that makes quite a big difference. So, like, say I'm on holiday, right? I'm on holiday and I don't respond to emails, and I actually personally turn my emails off. I get them off my phone, so I can't even physically see them. And I say to people, look, if you need me, phone me or WhatsApp me if I'm in the middle of nowhere, which is generally the case. So if I'm in the Outer Hebrides, right, WhatsApp me. So I think that's really important, that people feel that when they're off, they're off. And so I think there's lots of things that you can do and model as a leader to try and set those expectations. The thing I find really fascinating with Social Bite is that, as I say, it had this sort of predominant kind of commercial culture, if you like. So I guess I've been like slowly subverting this a little bit. Actually pretty consciously.
Very consciously.
So I think trying to introduce more flexibility for people, trying to make it okay for people to say, I actually don't think I can do that today, or all the rest of it. Whilst maintaining, like, one of the great things about the organization is it's very action orientated. So, I think I've always had this kind of less faff, more action mentality. So I think we do want to be very action orientated and we do want to get on with stuff, but equally it should be all right to say, like, I'm actually struggling for whatever reason, or I can't do it, or actually I'm going to take Friday off. So I think in the current crisis, I tried to say to people quite publicly, like, you can take a holiday, because because otherwise people could feel like, oh, well, I can't, like, this is also just too important, so I can't take a day off. It's like, well, you can, because otherwise you'll fall over eventually, right?
And from what you're saying, like, obviously the work that you do, and the social impact you make, you can leave work thinking about it, and you can think about the importance.
Absolutely.
You're dealing with.
Yeah.
I used to work at the Big Issue before, and I was based.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But within the team there, and actually your reflections on having some of the vendors come into the editorial office and hearing about the stories, and very significant circumstance when one of the vendors was murdered within Sauchiehall Street, and a horrible, awful thing.
Yeah.
It is something which obviously you're dealing with all of that kind of stuff, and within your work, obviously you mentioned Housing First, and you mentioned the strides that have been made recently within the homelessness sector to basically get people off the streets during COVID-19 and then maintain that. Could you tell us a little bit more about your work with the Pathfinders Housing First project, and then also the £3 million that was invested into that off the back?
So I think the Housing First program came around. Again, it was just like one of those like slightly insane things. It was a bit about face in a way. So we just after running the CEO Sleep Out, which was quite a successful event financially, and I remember, I think it was literally the next day, walking up the street with Josh, and he said, "Imagine if we did it in Princes Street Gardens. That would be good, wouldn't it?" And and I was like, actually, that would be really good. Like, I could actually see that happening. And so, yeah, I had this slightly insane notion that to run like a really massive sleep out. And right, so I think that's one of the slightly bizarre things about Social Bite is it's got like this insane ability to generate funds, right? And also not just funds, but also connection to the general public, and to kind of cut through to like normal people. I know that's like a strange way of putting it, but like to take an issue that people weren't really thinking about, or not at all, but there's this kind of public discomfort about homelessness, right? So how could we make it possible for people to be engaged with that, but not in a like worthy way of let's all knit a hat for somebody, but kind of in a let's actually do something and like have that real galvanizing effect. And I think it was just like a weird alchemy of things that happened that year, because we'd actually taken quite a lot of criticism for the Social Bite Village project that was developed, and some of the primary critics were from the academic community, and saying like, this is a bad idea, it's like a ghetto for homeless people. And there was quite a lot of negativity around the project, and so when we were thinking about the Sleep in the Park event, I think made one very, very good decision, which was to work with the academics on considering where do we put the funds from this event. So kind of got over ourselves, made friends with the folk that had been critiquing, charity, and I think that forged a lot of very positive, constructive relationships. And I think what Social Bite brought to that was cash, obviously. Which is good. Public awareness, also good. But I think we then, aligned ourselves with some really, really good people. I think first and foremost above all of the partners, I would say, is the Homeless Network Scotland, which is led by Maggie-Ann Bruniers, and she's just a phenomenal leader, individual. And so we've worked very closely with that organisation on making the Housing First programme a reality. So there's like, just to the basics of it, 5 different locations across Scotland. There's a consortium of partners in each location that provide intensive support to people when they are housed. And then there's a whole network of housing providers that are providing housing. So some of those are, you know, housing associations. Some of them is with the local council, depending on which local authority. So there's just a massive array of people. And so, yeah, we have the great pleasure of being part of that. And, you know, it moved beyond really being a social bike project to being a project for the whole of Scotland, because the Scottish Government then has put in sizable funds to the project as well. And I think what I feel quite proud about personally is, yeah, just the collaboration and partnerships involved. And I guess we've sort of kept this helicopter view of what's going on, but we're not like, you know,
yeah.
done like this way or whatever. So we keep, I personally have quite a lot of involvement in attending meetings and inputting, but it's kind of like, you know, you can go with it, guys. And what we try to bring is that pace of come on. Sure. We do quite a lot of that. So, you know, in terms of trying to get folk into houses and just being a pest about that mainly. Like,
it's a good
come on, this takes a lot. Go on, let's keep going.
I saw recently, so there's the Everyone Home Collective, which is obviously it's a recent initiative with 19 organisations, Shelter, Crisis Scotland, Simon Community Scotland, so a range of organisations. And the drive there is because we've taken people obviously off the streets from rough sleeping, and people are being housed differently. And from what I understand, the impetus and the kind of drive behind that campaign is to say, right now, what do we need to do following that approach of partnership work and working together to make sure that basically we can really tackle homelessness. And as you said at the start, I mean, we know that people are going to be poorer, people are going to lose jobs, people who are subject to domestic violence, that you know, issues of that will have increased. So therefore, homelessness is likely the effects of it. In terms of that project, and also in terms of I guess what we need to do as a society, big questions again as well, and the economy, kind of looking forward. It's a complex issue. It involves multiple disadvantages, and it will require multiple stakeholders to be involved in finding a solution to that. Again, huge question, but what is your view on, from what you can see as the early stages of that collective, as what we can all do together?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, you know, a couple of weeks into the crisis when folk were, so there's sort of between 200 and 300 people been housed in hotels across Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it's a mixture of people that might otherwise have been rough sleeping or staying within the night shelters, as well as a sizable number of people with no recourse to public funds. So have been accommodated. So I guess like there's just like an immediate opportunity really to ensure that those people don't return to rough sleeping basically. And I think, in terms of the folk that can access accommodation, then it's just making sure that that happens, and particularly with respect to people with the highest support needs. It's an ideal opportunity to try and get a reasonable number of people into the Housing First programme. So it's just not missing that opportunity, because one of the things that's been interesting about the group is you've got people accommodated that aren't normally accommodated, so have been,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, really cycling around rough sleeping or being in the shelters, or temp accommodation, and actually they're in one place for a few weeks at a time, and that's like quite a rare occurrence. So there's like interesting stories around how for the first time they've actually, certain individuals have been able to access healthcare like for the first time in however long, and it's like, wow, you know, it shouldn't take this for that to happen. But I think because they've been able to access some services within like the hotel complex, that's great at building the trust with individuals that can hopefully then translate to them getting permanent accommodation and ongoing support, and that would be a really brilliant result. With the guys that have got no recourse, it's much more complicated because, by definition, they're not entitled to any help. So I think, but what the situation has shown is that, well, when push comes to shove, the Scottish government is actually prepared to do something, because it's abhorrent to think of these folk on the streets. So I think there's a sense that, okay, well, if we could make an exception now, then could we just keep going with trying to find ways to support that group, even if it's not simple? But obviously, I think the concern is that it's going to be great if we can do as much as we can for those individuals, and that's absolutely what should happen. But it's high, you know, it's inevitable that there's going to be more people. So the day that the hotels finish, or you've started to move people out of the hotels, you know, the next month you're going to have another continuous wave of individuals coming. And I think that is the difficulty where, you know, that feels inevitable, because of likely redundancies, likely increased poverty, likely relationship breakdown because of, you know, the situation as well. So so that's the harder bit, and then that really comes back to, you know, the national approach around trying to house people more rapidly, be less reliant on poor emergency accommodation, yada yada. So I think those things that Scotland was trying to do anyway are still good things to do, and I think it's all just about making it happen.
And I think we've almost come kind of like full circle with where we started thinking about innovation and that space for innovation. We were speaking about it as being a kind of space in terms of an economic lever in some ways. So think about social enterprise, think about high street, all of that sort of thing. This type of innovation is going to be required, I'm assuming, and it's going to need money and funding. And that applies to us, I guess, as loan funders, and also to grant givers as well. There's going to be less funding about. There's going to be more people unemployed, as you've said, and a growing need. What would you say in terms of like delivering that type of social impact? Then your model, which is generating unrestricted funding, gives you the flexibility to make those choices. Would you say that you would see a sustained and growing need for that space and the funding and the support for innovation in those areas generally across the sector?
I think, I mean, there's always need for like more funding, isn't there?
It's a silly question. Do you think there should be more money? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But specifically,
I think back to that. Yes, there should definitely be more money for all good. So I think, obviously I'm going to say that. But
of course you should. But what I mean is, like, specifically for, it's kind of full circle. When it's tough times, basically you think about where is the greatest need, and sometimes the greatest need is what's in front of you. I just throwing cash at that need, rather than saying, here is some money and some funding to innovate and think beyond that, the need in front of you, if you know what I mean. It's kind of
I do know what you mean. And I think that hopefully the crisis does make you know, all charities, social enterprises consider, well, actually, were we spending our time in the right way? Like, could we be doing more? Could we be doing different? Like, I think it does encourage you to stop and think, you know, even though we've been quite busy, it still makes you stop and think, like, are we spending our time on the things that can make the most difference? And because you've then got this opportunity to almost put it back together again in a different way. So I was talking to like some of our enterprise staff a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, right guys, when we rebuild this, can we please not start doing anything again that's stupid? Like, can you like literally make a list of stuff that you think we should stop doing because it's a waste of energy and doesn't lead anywhere? Like, let's not put back in place anything that's just like counterproductive or irritating, or if there's a better way of doing it, let's start doing it from this point onwards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think all organizations have got an opportunity to do that. And that doesn't have to cost any money, actually. I suppose like that, I think that's the thing for me is like, you know, when push comes to shove, like, you know, money can be useful to innovate, but I think the most important thing is like your mindset of being prepared to try. And I always think about Social Bite as having like how I would describe it as like a yes and culture, you know, like it's the opposite of a no but culture.
Yeah.
So somebody says like, as is being discussed at the minute, well, why don't we start delivering brownies? Okay. So rather than, you know, delivering corporate sandwich platters, which no one's going to want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could develop and start delivering premium cakes because there's a gap in the market.
Yeah.
And we could do that because we have a production kitchen, and it would be a good idea because we can't buy the cakes we kind of want to sell. Why don't we just make them? Then that could make more employment, and that could develop new training opportunities. And also, I personally really like brownies. So those are good things. And so, you know, we had a call yesterday where it was like, well, yeah, we could do that. And why don't we also think about, you know, considering delivering other products? So like we were talking about afternoon teas, we're talking about picnics, we're talking about, I mean, literally anything is on the table. And I think there's the appetite to just try it and see what happens. And that's the predominant attitude, as opposed to, I think we were faced with this, and me personally, with this, I guess, choice at the beginning of the outbreak. Well, so in terms of our direct interaction with homeless community, we, as well as doing the deliveries that we've done using our vans across Scotland, we've also kept a cafe open in each of Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, to do a daily handout, a takeaway handout to people in need of food. And quite a lot of those services have shut. The kind of community food stuff shut, but I decided that I thought we should carry on because I felt like we could control the risk to the folk coming and to our staff. Were they happy to keep going? Could we provide them with the right guidance? Was it the right decision all the way through? Like it's quite a tough call. But we decided that we would keep going, and I'm really, really pleased that we did. So, you know, in every situation, you've got the option to go, no, but we can't. But yes, but we could, because it's not impossible, and we can put in place enough protection, and the guidance at this point means that we can do it. So let's do it rather than not do it. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely, completely.
And I think, so I went personally up to one of our cafes to think it through how we would do it. And I personally did it myself to see how would I feel actually doing it, do I feel okay actually doing this? And then you could tweak it. So talking to staff, you know, we've been debating, do we still give coffee? And we're like, no, let's not do coffee. It adds to the faff factor. It slows it all down. It adds to the interaction. Let's stop it. So we just give a bag and that's it. So like, what can we do and what can't we do? Like, I think it's just coming from that perspective of let's do what we can do. And that's exactly the thing going forward. So what ideas can we experiment with? What can we do? As opposed to, no, but we can't.
I think that's a great place to kind of to finish things on. I checked the questions coming through, and we only had a couple. We have covered everything which had actually been asked, but a key kind of takeaway from me is that the yes and approach, and that actually innovation doesn't necessarily cost money, and actually that whole kind of like start, stop, continue of things that weren't working, don't do them anymore. When you're looking to open up, rebuild things, deliver differently, review what wasn't working before, and think about what is possible going forward. So thank you very much, Jane. I really enjoyed that. That was fantastic. I hope to speak to you very soon, and good luck with everything at Social Bite.
Thank you very much. I have some colleagues on the line. I can see them. So thank you for coming to listen to me when you listen to me on Zoom enough, I'm sure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. Take care. Good luck with all your work, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. See you later. Bye.